talking about don't abandon your dreams. You know, I'm not going to claim to be a motorsport fan, but every once in a while I will watch the Indianapolis 500 for a minute. And what I noticed when watching these races, every driver at some point in the race has to make a pit stop. Now, when they make a pit stop, what they're doing is they are refueling. They're also changing tires if they've had a flat. And in some cases, they even change drivers if the other driver is fatigued. So a pit stop was not designed to keep the racer from finishing the race or keep the racer from winning the race. What it was actually there to do is equip the racer so that the racer can finish and finish well. Well, as I was reading this text today, I realized that we were faced with a man, a young man, a teenager, if you will, that had to make a pit stop. And the reason why he had to make a pit stop is because he had big dreams of finishing the race and finishing the race well. He had big dreams of God doing something through his life that others could not and would not do because they didn't have the favor on their life that he did. He was a man that had to make a pit stop. And Joseph learned a whole lot from his pit stop. He learned a whole lot from what he had to go through in order for God to develop him into the man that he wanted him to be. The first thing that we can learn from Joseph is that God is preparing you. Look at your neighbor and say, God is preparing you. The first thing that God was preparing Joseph to do, he was preparing Joseph to be a leader in his family. He gave Joseph a vision for his family. He was preparing him. When God spoke to Joseph, he told Joseph, look, you're going to be reigning over your entire family. And that was a whole lot for his family to stomach. But I don't understand why they were so upset, because really it was a vision for all of them. What Joseph was really trying to tell them is that we're going to all prosper, but he didn't even know how to interpret his dream at the time. All he knew is that God gave him a big dream for his family. All he knew is that God was calling him to a place of leadership within his family. And for somebody here today, you know that God has given you a vision for where you want your children to go. And it seems like the person who's rebelling against you the most is that child that you're just trying to direct, the child that you're trying to equip to carry out the vision that you have given them for their life. Joseph understood this, and he understood it well. He understood that God was calling him to something great, but he didn't understand what that greatness was. God was preparing him by giving him a vision for his family. God also was preparing him by giving him a vision for his future. Joseph was 17 years old, y'all, when he received this dream from God. 17 years old. So you can imagine why he went to his brothers and threw it in their face. I mean, 17 years old, look, man, look here. Y'all in trouble, man. I'm getting ready to rule over y'all. Y'all don't get it, man. I'm the boss. Do y'all know? And what was so hurtful to them was this. Joseph was the youngest of Jacob's children at the time. Benjamin hadn't been born yet. So this is the equivalent of my little brother coming up to me and saying, look here, you got to obey me. I'm somebody. And not only that, Joseph was the one that operated in integrity, because oftentimes he caught his brothers doing things that were unethical. And he would go back and report these things to his father. So because of that, his brothers already had some animosity toward him because they considered him to be a snitch. That boy's always telling on us. That boy always has something to say. But God was preparing him for his future, because he had to be a person of integrity in order for God to be able to trust him with the dream that he was placing in his heart. So Joseph was being developed and being prepared for his future, because at 17, God spoke to him. But it wasn't until he was 30 years old when he was ruling in the palace. So that's 13 years in between the time that God spoke to him and the time that he actually stepped into the leadership position that God was revealing to him. God was preparing him for his future. And then God was also preparing him by giving him a place to develop his faith. Now, most of us would agree. We hate having to deal with problems. We hate to deal with problems in our family, problems on our job. I mean, nobody is attracted to drama. But God was giving Joseph an opportunity, a place where his faith could develop. This is what that pit represented. Because while Joseph was in that pit, Joseph could not rely on his brothers because his brothers threw him in the pit. So he didn't know what his brothers were going to do. He didn't know whether or not they were going to rescue him, whether they were going to change their mind. He didn't know whether he was going to die in the pit. All he knew was that he had a dream, and then he had drama, all at the same time. He has this big dream of where God is taking him, and then he has this major drama going on within his family. His family's rebelling against him and throwing him in the pit. And this was all a part of God's plan. God was giving him a place to develop his faith. Because while he was in that pit, the only thing that he could do was call out to God. He could beg his brothers, but he had to trust his God. Look at your neighbor and tell them there's some things people can't do for you. Don't get it twisted. Don't get it twisted. It was not necessarily his brothers that pulled him out of the pit. It was God's power and authority over his brothers that made them reconsider what they were doing to Joseph. So when he called on his God got him out of the pit. His brothers were just a tool that he used. God was preparing him by allowing him to be in this pit. So what happened was his brother Reuben, he didn't want them to kill Joseph. So he gave them this clever idea. Why don't y'all just throw him in the pit? And in the back of his mind, he's saying, I'm going to come back later and rescue him. But when he got ready to come back to rescue him, he found out that his brother Judah had already pulled him out of the pit, and they had another idea, plan B. We definitely don't want him going back to the crib with these big dreams because I don't have a dream like that one. So we're going to strip him of his robe, which represented his authority, his favor that God had on his life. I'm going to take this ornate robe off of him because he's no longer going to return to this position. We're going to pretend like he's dead and go back, watch our father grieve. This is what got me, Vicente. This is really underhanded. To go and watch your daddy grieve, and act like you grieving with your daddy, consoling your daddy, and knowing that your brother is not dead. I don't know if I could do it. I hope I can't. I've grown to the point where I never say, I just hope I never could. God keep me from doing that to anybody. So here is Joseph. Brothers turned their backs on him, stripped him of his rightful position, seemingly, pulling him out of the pit, and now they're to the point where they're about to sell him into slavery. My second point for us tonight is God is positioning you. Look at your neighbor and say, God is positioning me. See, we have to make it personal. Because if you don't believe it, nobody else will. If you don't walk in it, nobody else can walk in it for you. There's some things that mama's faith can't do for you. God was positioning Joseph. Look at Joseph's life. Now his brothers are selling him into slavery. And they're selling him to the Ishmaelites. Now, we have to understand Joseph's lineage in order to understand what's going on here. Joseph was the son of Jacob, who was the son of Isaac. Isaac was the son of Abraham. Abraham's brother's name, Isaac's brother's name was. So who they were selling him to were the descendants of Ishmael. So here it is, knowing that Ishmael and his descendants were hostile toward Isaac, because Isaac was the son of promise. Isaac was the one that God was going to populate his entire kingdom through. Isaac was the one that God had identified as the chosen child. And here's Ishmael. And they sold Joseph to the Ishmaelites. So they sold him to a hostile group of people, to people who they knew could possibly go on to kill their brother for them. It was all a part of the plan. So to Joseph, this had to look like it's all over now. They've sold me over to the enemy. They sold me out. And the thing about it is they sold him cheap. They sold him for 20 shekels. Now think about 20 shekels and say to your neighbor, that's about $5 today. So not only did they sell him out, but they sold him out for almost nothing. Now, for somebody here today, you're looking at this situation and saying, I got family like that. They sold me out over nothing. We're not talking to each other over nothing. We're not talking to each other because of what happened at the barbecue last family reunion. We've sold each other out for nothing. We tripping over this dude that neither one of us love. We tripping over nothing. Tripping over some kind of post that somebody put on Facebook. We tripping over nothing. He sold out by his brothers for $5. But this was bigger than that, because this represented him being sold out of the promise, because he was a son of promise. Now you're sold to the child who was not the covenant child's family. But that didn't stop anything, because God was positioning him, because the only way for him to get to Egypt was for him to be sold into slavery. So God positions him in Egypt. Now here we have Joseph now, and the Ishmaelites decide that they're going to sell him to Potiphar. So he gets sold to Potiphar, who is an official. And in Potiphar's house, Potiphar realizes this man has favor on his life. God is doing something through this man. I can't put my finger on it, but this man is successful in everything that he does. He's connected to God. So he promotes Joseph to being the ruler over his household. So he had all this authority in the house, and he's still operating in integrity, because he still has the dream on his mind. Joseph never gave up on the dream. So he's doing everything he's supposed to do. And then here comes Potiphar's wife. She sees old sexy Joseph walking through the house. And got to imagine, and you know what, it sure would be good to get with Joseph. I've seen Potiphar, and Potiphar doesn't have a body like Joseph. And so she starts coming on to Joseph. But Joseph, being a man of integrity, said, I'm not going to give in to the temptation. I'm not going to betray my master by sleeping with his wife. The master has made everything in this house accessible to me. I rule over this household. I'm not going to do anything to hurt him. But Potiphar's wife didn't give up. Potiphar's wife came and found him alone. No witnesses. And she had this song going through her mind. I'm tempted to say it, but maybe I should. You say it, but since they say cheating in the next room. Oh, no. That's what she had on her mind. to the trap. He ran from her. She grabs a hold of his garment, tears his garment, turns around and gives it to her husband and says, look, he has raped me. Look what he's done to me. So now here Joseph is falsely accused, thinking certainly, I don't know what's going on. Because God, I thought you were giving me a place where I'm being positioned. And so now, I don't know about y'all. I can't really knock Potiphar, because if somebody touches my wife in an inappropriate way, at a minimum, we have to call the police. At a minimum. You know what I'm saying, Robert Lynn? At a minimum, we got to call the police. So now here Joseph finds himself in prison. Look at your neighbor and say, he's still being positioned. He's in this prison, a place that he does not want to be in. Now let me run it down what's happened. God has prepared him by allowing him to be in a pit. God has positioned him by allowing him to be in Potiphar's house, in a house that is probably second best for him because it's still not home. He's in a house, but the house is still not his own home because he's not with his father any longer. And now he's in a position to where God is going to promote him. Look at your neighbor and say, here comes the promotion. Look at what Genesis 39:19 through 20 says, if y'all will. Do we have it? Genesis 39:19 through 20. Well, put that one back up. Genesis 39:2 through 4. It says, the Lord was with Joseph, so he succeeded in everything he did as he served in the home of his Egyptian master. Potiphar noticed this and realized that the Lord was with Joseph, giving him success in everything he did. This pleased Potiphar, so he soon made Joseph his personal attendant. He put him in charge of his entire household and everything that he owned. So here he is. He had been in Potiphar's house, a house that's not his own, but God gave him position. Now he is transitioning to a prison, and this is the place where God is going to promote him. And for somebody today, you feel like you are in prison. Feel like you're trapped somewhere that you don't want to be. And you can't understand why God had you there. And God is actually trying to promote you. Because it's only in this position that you really will be able to receive the promotion. You know, a while back I went to a crawfish boil. Now, I didn't know much about crawfish at the time, except for they taste good, and I like those potatoes and corn that goes along with the crawfish. It has a good seasoning to it. So when I went to this crawfish boil, I realized I saw all of these containers of salt, and they hadn't started boiling the crawfish yet. They were just in this big old trough or bucket, and I said, what are y'all getting ready to do with all that salt? Man, all our blood pressure is going to be through the roof. And they said, what we're going to do with this salt, we're going to dump it over the crawfish. And they called them, whatchamacallit told me about them, Cynthia, mud bugs. She's from Louisiana. She came and she said, mud bugs. And I said, what are you talking about? She said, crawfish. I said, oh, okay. So we're at Kevin Foster's house, and they're dumping all this salt over, and it's purging these crawfish. They're vomiting up all this stuff that's in them, and it's cleansing them out. And I said, man, that's nasty. And then they rinsed them. They put all this water, they put them on all this water. They rinsed them once, then they turned around and they rinsed them twice. Then they turned around and they rinsed them a third time. And they said, you know, we have to do this because the crawfish won't taste good. And you're going to be eating some things that you don't want to eat if you don't purge the crawfish first. Now, when I thought about that, I said, you know, God, this is just like Joseph and just like us. Sometimes you have to place us in a position where you can dump a whole lot of salt on us in order to purge us of all this stuff, all of this dirt, all of these things that we've learned over all these years so that we can even be productive and taste good to us.